All right, so we're diving deep today into James 2:14 to 17.
Yeah, a passage I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with.
For sure, you hear it in sermons and Bible studies all the time.
Exactly. It's one of those verses that, pastors and Bible study leaders just keep coming back to.
But we're not here to rehash the same old points,
Mhm.
right? We want to go deeper.
Exactly. So today we're looking at how other pastors are approaching James 2:14 to 17 in fresh ways.
Yeah, like what are some of the unique perspectives out there? Because our listeners are looking for those new angles, illustrations that really pop.
Absolutely. And we've got a stack of sermons here from all over. And what's been fascinating is how many are moving beyond that simple faith without works is dead idea.
Right. So what are they doing differently?
Well, lots of them are really digging into the why and the how, like why does faith require action and how do we actually live that out?
Okay, so less about just stating the obvious and more about really unpacking it.
Precisely. And they're using some really creative ways to do that. Like one sermon we looked at from Kingston Citadel, they used this powerful analogy of a guy stuck in a flood refusing rescue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like you have faith that you'll be saved, but if you don't actually reach out and grab the lifeline when it's offered, what good is that faith? You're just going to drown.
Right. It's about taking action, actually doing something.
Exactly. And that idea of action being a natural result of genuine faith, that was another theme that came up a lot.
Okay. I'm interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, so Limitless Church California, they had a really insightful point about the Greek word for works in this passage,
This-
ergon. And they pointed out how ergon emphasizes that works aren't this separate thing from faith.
Like it's not just a checklist of good deeds you have to do.
Exactly. It's more like an outgrowth, a natural consequence of genuine faith.
If your faith is real, it's going to produce something.
Exactly. They use the analogy of a shepherd and their sheep. A good shepherd doesn't just stand there and shout instructions.
Right. They're actively involved, guiding and protecting.
Exactly. It's about actively living out your faith, caring for those around you.
Yeah, I like that. It's not passive. It's
Right.
about actively living out your beliefs. Now, another thing I noticed was this idea of fake faith.
Oh, yeah. That's always a tough one.
But it was interesting to see a few sermons tackle it head on. You know, really challenge people to examine their own hearts.
Yeah, for sure. And Concord Church Dallas had this really striking illustration comparing fake faith to counterfeit products.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, like on the surface, it might look like the real deal, but underneath, it's hollow. There's no substance to it.
Wow, that's going to hit home for some people.
Right. It forces you to ask yourself, is my faith genuine or am I just going through the motions?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. So we've talked about the why behind faith and works, this idea of action being a natural outflow of genuine faith. But what about the how? I mean, I'm sure pastors are looking for concrete ways to help their congregations actually put this into practice, right?
Absolutely. And that's where, things get really practical.
So what are some of the approaches we're seeing?
Well, Menlo Church, for example, they focused on three specific areas: justice, kindness, and humility. And they tied those actions directly back to Jesus's teachings, showing how these are tangible ways we can live out our faith.
Okay, yeah, because it's easy to get lost in these abstract concepts, but that gives people something concrete to grab onto.
Right. And they had this great analogy of a coach who shows rather than just shouts instructions.
I like that because you're not just telling people what to do, you're actually modeling it for them.
Exactly. It's about embodying those qualities we want to see in others.
So modeling concrete actions, what else stood out to you from these sermons?
Well, a few pastors actually delved into the historical context of James's letter, which was really interesting.
Oh, how so?
Well, one pastor pointed out that when James was writing this, the early church was facing a lot of financial pressure.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be relevant.
And he suggested that this might have contributed to some favoritism towards wealthy members of the church.
Ah, so James's emphasis on not showing partiality. It wasn't just some abstract theological concept.
Exactly. It was a real issue he was addressing in his community.
And sadly, it's an issue that's still relevant today, in different forms, of course.
Absolutely. We still struggle with economic inequality and all sorts of other forms of partiality.
Yeah, so it really drives home that message of James 2:14 to 17, treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or social standing.
Exactly. And ensuring our actions are consistent with our beliefs, that our faith is actually making a difference in the world.
It's amazing, isn't it, how a passage that seems so straightforward on the surface can have so much depth to it when you really dig in.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's so exciting about studying the Bible. There's always more to discover.
It's a living, breathing text, and it speaks to us in new ways all the time.
It does, and I think these pastors are doing a great job of breathing new life into James 2:14 to 17 and making it relevant for people today.
Yeah, I think so too. It's encouraging to see how they're finding creative ways to connect with their congregations and
Hmm.
really challenge them to live out their faith in a deeper way.
And it seems like people are really hungry for this kind of teaching. They want practical guidance on how to actually live out their beliefs in their everyday lives.
I think that's so true because it's easy to get caught up in the intellectual side of faith. But James is calling us to something more.
He is. He's calling us to action, to put our faith into practice.
And that's the challenge for all of us, right? Bridging that gap between belief and behavior.
It is, and I think these sermons offer some great insights and tools for doing just that.
Definitely. I'm excited to dive in and see what else we can glean from them.
Me too. I think our listeners are going to find some real gems in here.
All right, so let's get into it. One pastor we looked at, he compared faith without works to, what was it? A sandwich without the filling.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one.
I thought that was brilliant. So simple, but so effective.
Right. Because everyone can relate to that. You know, you pick up a sandwich and you're expecting something delicious.
And then it's just two pieces of bread.
Exactly. And that's kind of like faith without works. It might look like the real thing, but it's not going to satisfy you. It's not going to nourish you.
Right, it's lacking that substance, that real, meat of the matter.
Exactly. And I think that's what we need more of, these relatable, memorable illustrations that make these ancient truths come alive for people today.
Absolutely, because we're not just dealing with abstract concepts here.
Mm.
We're talking about how to live our lives, how to make our faith real in the world.
Precisely. And these pastors are showing us that it's possible.
So as you're listening to this and you're thinking about your own sermons or Bible studies, what advice would you give? What are some key takeaways from these sermons that you think would be helpful?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is to, don't be afraid to go beyond the surface level.
Right, don't just tell people that faith without works is dead. Show them what that looks like.
Exactly. Use vivid illustrations, connect it to the challenges people are facing in their everyday lives, and give them concrete steps they can take to put their faith into action.
Yeah, because it's one thing to hear the message, but it's another thing entirely to actually apply it.
Absolutely. And I think one way to do that is to really challenge your congregation or your study group to engage with this passage on a personal level.
How so?
Well, maybe you could challenge them to identify one specific area where they can put their faith into action this week. Give them a concrete challenge, something they can actually do that will stretch them and help them grow.
Yeah, I like that idea. Give them something tangible to work with.
And then maybe even encourage them to share their experiences with each other, create a space for accountability and mutual encouragement.
Oh, that's a great point, because living out our faith isn't always easy.
It's not, and we need each other's support and encouragement to stay the course.
It's not about being perfect. It's about progress, right? Continually striving to align our actions with our beliefs.
Exactly, and I think that's what James is really getting at in this passage. It's not about earning our salvation through good works.
Right. It's about letting our faith flow naturally into action, into love, into service.
You put it beautifully, and ultimately, it's about becoming more like Christ in everything we do.
And that's a message that resonates no matter where you are on your faith journey.
It does, and I think these sermons offer some really inspiring examples of what that can look like in practice.
So, for those listening, as you prepare your own sermons or Bible studies, what's one key thought you would leave them with?
I think, more than anything, it's a call to authenticity, to not just preach about faith and works, but to actually show people what it means to live it out.
To be those showers, and not
Yeah.
just the shouters, right?
Exactly. Challenge your listeners to examine their hearts, to identify those areas where their actions might not be lining up with their beliefs, and encourage them to take a step, even a small one, towards a more authentic expression of their faith.
I love that. And to remember that it's a journey. We're all constantly growing and learning and striving to become more like Christ.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The journey never ends.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, and I hope our listeners have found this exploration of James 2:14 to 17 insightful and maybe even a little inspiring.
I think so too, and I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. We'll be back next time with another stack of sources ready to uncover those hidden gems.
Until then, Keep seeking, keep learning, and keep striving to live out your faith in a way that truly makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, it's amazing, how a passage like this seems so simple at first glance.
Right.
But then when you really start digging in, there's just so much there.
Yeah, totally. And what's really encouraging to me is it seems like people are really hungry for this kind of teaching.
Yeah.
They want that practical guidance, how to live out their faith in a real way.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get caught up in all the intellectual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But James is calling us to something more.
He is. He's calling us to action.
To action, yeah. And that's the challenge, isn't it? For all of us, but especially for pastors and Bible study
Yeah.
leaders.
Absolutely.
How do you bridge that gap
Yeah.
between believing something and then actually doing it, living it
Well,
out?
That's the million-dollar question right there. How do you help people move beyond just hearing the word
Mm-hmm.
to actually putting it into practice?
Yeah, and it seems like these sermons we've been looking at, they offer some creative solutions.
They do. They do. And, going back to that idea of illustrations,
Mm-hmm.
one pastor, I remember he compared faith without works to a sandwich without the filling.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
I thought that was so clever.
So simple, but so effective.
Right. Because everyone can relate to that. Like, you pick up a sandwich,
You're expecting
something delicious,
right.
and then you bite into it, and it's just two pieces of bread, What's the point?
Yeah, it's like, where's the beef?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's kind of what faith without works is like.
Right, like it might look like the real thing on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no substance there.
There's no substance. It's not going to satisfy you.
Yeah, it's not going to nourish you. It's not going to give you what you need.
Exactly. And that's what I think we need more of, these relatable, memorable illustrations that really bring these ancient truths to life.
Absolutely. Because we're not just talking about, abstract ideas here. We're talking about how to live our lives,
Yeah.
how to make our faith real
How to make it really, yeah.
in the world.
In the world. Mm-hmm.
So for those listening, maybe they're prepping their own sermon on James 2:14-17,
Yeah.
or getting ready to lead a Bible study. What advice would you give them?
Well, I think based on what we've seen in these sermons, the biggest takeaway is don't be afraid to go deeper, Go beyond just stating the obvious.
Yeah, don't just say faith without works is dead.
Exactly. Show them what that looks like, Use those vivid illustrations, connect it to the real struggles people are facing.
Yeah, make it real for them.
Make it real and give them concrete steps they can actually take.
Right, because it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to actually do something about it.
Totally. And I think a good way to do that is to really challenge people, challenge them to engage with this passage personally.
Okay, how would you suggest doing that?
Well, maybe you could challenge them to identify one specific area where they can put their faith into action this week,
Mm-hmm.
Give them a concrete challenge, something that's going to stretch them a little bit.
Right, something tangible.
Something tangible, yeah, that they can actually do. And then, encourage them to share their experiences with each other.
I like that, the sharing piece.
Yeah, create that space for accountability,
Yeah.
And for encouragement, too, because let's face it, living out our faith,
It's not easy.
it's not always easy. We need each other
Really?
to support each other and to keep us going.
It's not about being perfect.
No.
It's about making progress. Right. Just continually striving to align our actions with what we believe.
Yeah, and I think that's really what James is getting at here. It's not about earning our salvation through good works.
Right. It's about letting our faith flow out naturally
Naturally.
into action, into love, into serving others.
Beautifully said. And ultimately, it's about becoming more like Christ in everything we do.
And that's a message that resonates no matter where you are on your faith journey.
It really does. It's universal.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just a few verses,
Mm-hmm.
but we've uncovered so much.
Yeah.
Just goes to show you,
It's like an onion, right? You keep peeling back the layers,
Yeah,
and there's always more there.
always something new to discover.
Hmm.
So as we wrap up here,
Yeah.
for all those pastors and Bible study leaders out there listening,
Mm-hmm.
what's like the one key thought you want them to take away?
Well, after looking at all these different sermons, I think the main takeaway, the overarching theme is this call to authenticity,
Yeah.
to not just talk about faith and works, but to actually show people what it means to live it out.
Right, to be those showers and not just the showers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's easy to get caught up in just talking the talk.
Mm-hmm.
But James is calling us to walk the walk, too.
Yeah, to put our faith into action.
Exactly. So I would say challenge your listeners, encourage them to really examine their own hearts,
Hmm.
to identify those areas where maybe their actions aren't lining up with their beliefs.
Right, that disconnect.
Yeah, exactly. And then encourage them to take a step, even
Yeah.
a small one,
Hmm.
towards living out their faith more authentically.
Yeah, I love that.
And to remember, it's a journey.
Right, it's not a destination.
It's not about being perfect, it's about progress.
Exactly. We're all constantly growing and learning.
And striving to become more like Christ.
And that's something we can all keep working towards, no matter where we are on our faith journey.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so beautiful, right? It's a lifelong journey.
The journey never ends.
Never ends.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on.
I think so too.
So thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into James 2:14-17.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful.
Yeah, hopefully got some new ideas for your next sermon or Bible study.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep striving to make your faith real in the world.
Yeah, go out there and be those showers.